Welcome back to the Twinspires Racing Roundtable. I'm Ashley Anderson here with James Scully and Vance Hansen. Today we'll be looking at the Belmont Derby and Belmont Oaks, talking about next and whether he should point toward the Breeders' Cup Classic and what else caught our eye from the weekend. But before we start off, I wanted to mention our fantasy handicapping contest. We had week 3 just went by, and I can now say I've joined the ranks of James and Vance. I won week 3 of the contest. So look at us on the roundtable.
I look at that list of those 8 handicappers right there. And I mean, based on the last 3 weeks, the top 3 on that list are all right here on the show today. So yeah, that's pretty awesome.
And that was a great, and Ashley, that was a great pick by you at Ellis Park, picking the $20+ winner of that turf sprint for fillies. So good on you. It was a terrific weekend to win the first place prize.
Thank you. And I think we just have one more week left. So we'll see if one of us finishes out strong, or maybe someone else, maybe Darren, who's another of our video experts as well. We'll see what happens there. But going to be another exciting week 4 of our handicapping contest. But let's move back over to some stakes recaps and talk about the Belmont Derby and the Belmont Oaks. So Vance, tell me what your takeaways were from the Belmont Derby or the Belmont Oaks.
Well, I found the Belmont Oaks a more intriguing race than the Derby, both before and after they were run. So I'll restrict my comments to the Oaks. And it was a pretty solid field for this race. We had 3 good quality Europeans come over, and the one that performed the best was the winner, Cinderella's Dream. Another big win for Godolphin and trainer Charlie Appleby. You see Cinderella's Dream taken back near the back of the field there under Will Buick. She had brought a 4-for-5 record into this race, won a couple of races in England last fall, and then went 2-for-2 in Dubai over the winter. And she came out of a really good race. She was beaten less than 5 lengths in the 1,000 guineas at Newmarket, and the form of that race has held up very well. I know 2 of the top 3 finishers in that race went on to finish first and third in the Coronation Stakes at Royal Ascot in late June. So Cinderella's Dream had some really good form coming into this. She was stepping up beyond a mile for the first time. Appleby thought she would get the 1 3/16 distance, and she did it very impressively. As you'll see here, she's going to be making her move around the far turn, and she finished up so well, she wound up breaking the course record for a 1 3/16 on the Aqueduct turf. Now, granted, this outer turf course has only been reintroduced in the last couple of years. It's a seldom used distance, especially for grade 1, group 1 type of races, but still pretty impressive that she broke the course record doing so. And also she eclipsed the Belmont Derby time by more than a second, although the Belmont Derby did have a much slower pace. So very impressive performance by Cinderella's Dream. She's going to stay at Saratoga this summer. She's going to point for the Saratoga Oaks, I assume. The Queen Elizabeth II Challenge Cup at Keeneland in October is also on her agenda. Real briefly, the runner-up Segesta ran a pretty good race for second. She Feels Pretty was the odds-on favorite here. She ran third, looked a little flat in the stretch. Not quite sure a 1 1/8 is really how far she wants to go, and trainer Cherie DeVoe has talked about dropping her back down to a mile in the Lake Placid Stakes for her next start. So I don't think we'll see She Feels Pretty in any major grade 1 races at 9 furlongs and up going forward the rest of the year necessarily, but she'd have a hard time, I think, reversing form with Cinderella's Dream. James?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I like She Feels Pretty coming into that race. I agree with all your points, but I'm going to focus on the Belmont Derby. And basically, it's just time to respect trickery. Trickery is a colt that 2 starts back. He won the Grade 2 American Turf. He had won the Rushaway Stakes on the Jeff Ruby Stakes undercard at Turfway on Tapeta. Then he won the American Turf, the Grade 2 American Turf on the Derby undercard. And in his previous start, he had finished a close third, like a half-length third in the Penn Derby or Penn Mile, excuse me. And that was a race that Graham Motion said right after the race. He said leading into the Belmont Derby, he felt that Trickery pulled himself up on the lead that day. He gave him an excuse, was really disappointed he did that. But he even talked about after this race, I mean, he's a colt that it's just real important, he believes, not to, strike the front too early with. But Trickery was the 5.20 co-third choice in a field of 5. People were betting other runners, especially Legend of Time, but even the runner-up, but the other runners in the field took money. And once the race was over, Graham Motion, I mean, he even said, he was amused that that Trickery wasn't one of the favorites, didn't get bet down to shorter odds. And he essentially just mocked. He said, quote, I was a little amused he was not respected once again, which is great for the people that keep betting him. So, he took a little shot at the bettors for not respecting his horse Trickery. And let me just say this. This is his first Grade 1 victory, his third stakes win this year. He's now won 3 of his last 4 starts. And, I think it's fair to say, he's the best U.S. 3-year-old turf horse right at this point. Now, he's going to be running against some others out there that, and that the argument will be decided in the coming months. But this was a terrific effort by Trickery. Motion seemed to indicate that the 1 mile Grade 2 Secretariat Stakes at Colonial Downs on August 10th will be an option for him moving forward. So maybe we'll see him there at Colonial next time out, Ashley.
That was my big takeaway too, is respecting Trickery going forward, because we had this race for our handicapping contest, and I ended up going with Legend of Time. So I had the wrong race with Godolphin and Charlie Appleby. He ended up getting the Oaks instead. But Legend of Time was also boxed in along the rails. So maybe a different trip, things would have been different. I did want to point out White Palomino also, this is the second straight race, had the lead, set the early lead, and then just nabbed at the wire. So I thought that was a pretty good race from White Palomino as well. But with Trickery, looking at the 47-1 win in the American Turf, it was easy to say, okay, that was maybe a fluke. And then had a good race last time out, but I still was willing to write him off. And now you certainly have to respect him. But I don't think we're going to get 5-1 next race either. So it'll be.
I think that's a fair point about the Godolphin runner. Because, after Trickery beat him in the American Turf and, he had a little bit of a trouble trip that day, he came right back and won the Grade 2 Pennine Ridge. So, he definitely one of the top horses in America in the 3-year-old turf ranks. And Trickery's beaten him both times. So, he's got the edge right now, and he's looking good. First Grade 1 winner for Oscar Performance, first Grade 1 win for Graham Motion since 2022.
I was going to note that as well. I think his 32nd overall Grade 1 victory. And you mentioned it too. He was looking at the Secretariat at Colonial, but also Kentucky Downs on the turf is an option as well in September. So we'll see where he ends up and if he is going to cut back to a mile or stick to longer distances. And then with Charlie Appleby too, with his win in the Oaks, he now has 9 graded stakes wins since he came over here in the spring. So he has picked some good horses to bring over to the U.S., but a few of them have been surprises when they don't come through as these heavy favorites as well. Well, let's move on to the Grade 2 Brooklyn, where Next won once again in very dominant fashion, and now there's talk as to whether he should stick to the marathon division or go to the Breeders' Cup Classic potentially. So, James, what do you think he should do?
I think he should test the waters for the Breeders' Cup Classic. 100%. It is time to strike while the iron's hot. The fact of the matter is, Next has just become too formidable for the competition in these marathon stakes. He's way better than he was last year right now. He's coming off 2 super fast performances. And he's won his last 4 outings by a combined 57.5 lengths, or 57.25 lengths. That's his all 4 stakes. He's just destroying the competition. the fact is that next is there's some mile and a quarter races, grade 1 mile and a quarter races coming up, namely the grade 1 Jockey Club Gold Cup at Saratoga on September 1st. Next would have a chance to go right into that race and win it, because right now there are absolutely no standouts in the older male or the 3-year-old male division. I mean, who would he be fearful of? Doug Cohen's the trainer running next against. He's running fast times. He's an up close early presser who's become faster as a 6-year-old. I don't think he'd have any trouble with the pace dynamics in the Grade 1 Jockey Club Gold Cup. And I just think that given this murkiness of the Breeders' Cup Classic picture, if you ask 3 different people who's going to win the Classic right now, you get 3 different answers probably. I think just the situation is ripe for next to try a Grade 1 race on dirt. And if he wins that race, and he'll have a big chance to do so, in my opinion, then the next step would just naturally to be go to the Breeders' Cup Classic. I'll point out Doug Cowan's one of the things he talked about was pace dynamics. I'm not worried about that at all. Next is he's not going to catch a fast pace in a race like the Jockey Club Gold Cup, and Doug Cowan's has absolutely been on fire since May 1st. He won this Grade 2 Brooklyn at Aqueduct on Friday, or Grade 2 Brooklyn, on Friday. He came right back the next day. He won the Michael Schaefer Memorial at Horseshoe, Indianapolis, with a horse Injunction that they had just claimed for $80,000 out of his last start. And Callens has now won 5 races in a row, 6 of his last 7 starts. And since May 1st, he is 17 for 35 with those 17 wins coming at 7 different racetracks. So keep an eye out for his barn moving forward. And I certainly hope that they give serious consideration to the Jockey Club Gold Cup fans.
Yeah, you hit all the high points of why he should aim a little higher for his next start, especially the paucity of depth and the lack of consistency among the older dirt horses. And frankly, his speed figures are pretty competitive against the very best in this division. Cowan said he was probably inclined to go for the Birdstone Stakes at Saratoga for his next start. That's over a mile and 3/4, if I'm not mistaken. But Cowan's also made the point that, with Next being so dominant, that there's a chance the Birdstone might not even fill and the race might not even be run. So
I think there's a good chance.
The speculation that race might not even go is not hard to envision. So and frankly, the top leader in the division right now is National Treasure, but he's still a bit of a question mark over a mile and a quarter, in my opinion. And if Next can prove his effectiveness at a mile and a quarter and turn himself into a Breeders' Cup Classic contender, I think everyone wins in that particular scenario. So I'm all for Next stepping out of the marathon division briefly, test the waters, see how he does. He could even try the Pacific Classic. Get a race over the track at Del Mar in advance of the Breeders' Cup Classic. I think that would be a smart move as well if he doesn't want to go for the Gold Cup. So I'm with you, James, on that. Ashley?
You mentioned the Birdstone last year. He won that race by 11 3/4. Then he won the Greenwood Cup by 25 lengths. Then he won the Isaac Murphy Marathon by 11 1/4. This was his shortest margin of victory in his last 5 starts, I believe. So, or maybe his last 4. But
yeah, he's slipping.
Yeah, he's slipping a little bit, so controversial. But I would like to see him try the Classic. Again, talking about the competition, it is kind of wide open. Next got a 109 Brisnet speed figure. King's Barn just won the Stephen Foster with a 102, racing at a mile and an eighth. So he certainly fits in with that dynamic there. But as we've talked, the connections have already said, his trainer has said that he wants to potentially just keep running these marathon races because he is worried about the pace scenario. But I will also say Next had his final his final furlong in less than 12 seconds. His fractions were pretty crazy in this most recent start. And I definitely think he would be a top contender in the Classic. I just don't know if his connections will go for it or not, but it would be fun to see him show up in that spot.
He ran and then Isaac Murphy, he ran a mile and a half in 2:27, which is faster than 9 out of every 10 Belmont winners. So I mean, he is running real serious horse time. He has gotten better. I think that's the thing. I mean, I think Cowens is looking at him through a gauge of what he's been in the past. But you guys both made the point with that 109 Bristnet speed rating. That figure is good enough to win any Breeders' Cup Classic prep race so far this year.
Well, let's talk about what else caught our eye from the weekend. So, Vance, what do you have?
A few stops on my list. We'll start at Aqueduct with the domestic products win in the Dwyer on Saturday. It's possible to overstate his performance. He was only running against 3 horses, including Hades, who beat him in the Holy Bull Stakes over the winter, and Hades really hasn't panned out that well. But domestic product, as we'll see over the next minute 33 and change, just dominated this field. Easily the best race of his career so far. He went on to win by 7.5 lengths. Like I said, he finished up in 133 and change, which is really major racehorse time for a one-turn mile, I think, or regardless of how old you are. And you know what? Based on this performance, perhaps trainer Chad Brown and owner Seth Klarman have really found this horse's niche. I mean, admittedly, he won a 1.125 mile maiden race at Aqueduct last fall. They tested the classic waters with him. He won the Tampa Bay Derby over a 1.16 miles, but he simply wasn't fast enough to compete in the Kentucky Derby. And then he was a distant 6th in the Pegasus Stakes at Monmouth Park last time. That was also around 2 turns at a 1.16 miles. But this performance, I think, suggested that maybe a longer one-turn races, 7 furlongs perhaps, but it's definitely a mile, could be up his alley. And, by the end of the season, I think this horse could be a potential cigar mile type of contender. So I think going forward, haven't read what domestic products short-term plans are after the Dwyer, but I think that they should seriously consider keeping him around 1 turn based off of this performance. I'll briefly mention some of the action at Delaware Park also yesterday, a card that was postponed from Saturday to Monday due to hot weather. The Delaware Oaks turned into probably the most exciting race of the long holiday weekend. Power Squeeze, you can see here on the inside, just holding off the odds-on favorite Sidamara in her stakes debut. This was Power Squeeze's 4th stakes win of the year. She had won the Suncoast at Tampa, the Gulfstream Park Oaks, and then had run a distant 3rd to Torpedo Anna in both the Kentucky Oaks and Coaching Club American Oaks. And her connection said after yesterday's race that they're pointing her towards the Cotillion with a possible prep in the Catherine Sophia at Parks. And I think this is a really good move. There's no reason to take on Torpedo Anna at this point, especially given the results of the Kentucky Oaks and the Acorn Stakes in their last 2 encounters. So they're doing right by this filly, pointing for the Cotillion. Power Squeeze still has a lot of good races left in her. And I thought this was a pretty good performance both on her part and on Sidamara's part. I think Sidamara has got a graded stakes win in her future pretty soon. And finally, I'd also mentioned a stakes debuter at Delaware yesterday. Whiskey Decision won the Christiana Stakes for 3-year-old fillies on the turf. That was her stakes debut. She was favored at 1-5 following an allowance win at Churchill Downs for Arnaud Delacour. And she won pretty comfortably here. And Delacour said after the race that she'd probably go for the Lake Placid at Saratoga over a mile, or go to Del Mar for the Del Mar Oaks over a 1.125 miles. And this is a very well-bred filly. She's won 3 of 4, and I think she also has a very bright future, James.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned Power Squeeze's trainer because, Power Squeeze, I mean, outside of Torpedo Anna, she's one of the best 3-year-old fillies out there, and she has no interest whatsoever, and she won't be the only stakes type. Now, maybe if Kenny McPeak wants to keep Torpedo Anna against fillies, they could round up some New York breds or allowance types, but yeah, the good stakes, other good stakes 3-year-old fillies won't be running against her. They have no reason to. As far as what else caught my eye over the weekend, there's bigger races looming on the horizon, but Saturday's Grade 2 Indiana Derby, I thought provided another gauge of perhaps what's to come in the 3-year-old division in the second half of the season. Dragoon Guard was making his stakes debut in this race for Brad Cox, coming off a maiden win at Keeneland and an entry-level allowance win at Churchill Downs. You can see him. He's the gray, number 8. Goes right to the front, sets the pace on a short lead, gets to the top of the stretch. Stronghold, the Santa Anita Derby winner, tries to make a run at him, and he draws off to win easily by 2.5 lengths. Stronghold, like I said, Santa Anita Derby winner. He came back his first race after Kentucky Derby. He runs second to a stakes debuter. And 3 weeks ago, we had another race which had a Derby participant, Louisiana Derby winner Catching Freedom, who was odds on in the Grade 3 Ohio Derby. He ran into a stakes debuter and battened down. I mean, he ran into a 3-year-old colt off a maiden win, and that colt beat him. So, the interesting thing about Dragoon Guard and Batten Down is that both these colts were maidens when they were running the final round of major Kentucky Derby prep races in early April. I thought that the early season preps really didn't tell us anything for the hierarchy in the division. All 3 winners of the Triple Crown races paid more than $20, and I'm looking for more chaos to come in upcoming races like the Haskell, Jim Dandy, and Travers, because I think the 3-year-old pitcher is wide open and ripe for horses like Batten Down and Dragoon Guard to make a major impact. I'll just also say Juddmonte Farm campaigns both of these homebreds with Batten Downs with Bill Mott and Dragoon Guards with Brad Cox. And one other final point to make is I wanted to bring this up. Dragoon Guard is one of several up-and-coming types from the final 2 crops of Arrogate. Arrogate's got a 4-year-old sprinter out there named Subrogate, who's just won 3 allowances in a row. He got a 104 number for winning by like 6 lengths a couple weeks ago. I think he's going straight to Grade 1 competition, and he won't be overmatched at that level. He's by Arrogate. And then Vance mentioned Sidamara, sorry. She's by Arrogate. That was her stakes debut in the Delaware Oaks. It looks like she's going places off that no second. And Dragoon Guard is another Arrogate colt. So we've just seen just the last month, I think, 3 really promising runners, 2 of them in stakes, 1 in allowance by Arrogate, that are eligible to make some noise in their respective divisions moving forward. I thought I'd add that. Really a shame we lost Arrogate when we did, but he was just one of the best sires we had seen in years when he passed Ashley.
Yeah, I'm going to talk about real quickly a couple of sires, or actually 2 different sires that had a couple of winners this weekend. But first, I want to mention Sweet Azteca getting her 2nd straight stakes win in the Great Lady M Stakes at Los Alamitos this weekend. Got a career best 106 Brisnet speed figure and set a course record for 6.5 furlongs with a time of 1:14:33 seconds. Or that's not how you say that. You know what I'm saying? I'm never good at saying that. She won by 5 lengths and now 4 for 5 with her lone loss coming in her second start off a pretty lengthy layoff. And she might be up there in the conversation for older dirt female. The race call might be competing with this race call. It's a little loud. So maybe I'll just let it play. Okay, we're not going to play it because, yeah. All right, so anyway, it's live TV. So Sweet Azteca, beat Adair Manor in the Beholder. And, I think she maybe needs a few more wins to her resume, but could be in that older dirt female conversation as well. And then I mentioned there's a few sires that got a couple of winners this weekend. One of them was Money Supply, who got a win for Practical Joke, and Domestic Product also is by Practical Joke as well. So Money Supply, I had been following from Fairgrounds and won the Mine Shaft and then tried turf for the first time. It was interesting because Cross entered in that Michael Schaefer Memorial. That Injection ended up winning, but the Connections wanted to try turf and it paid off as well. So I really was expecting to see Money Supply stick to the dirt, but has been able to win on a fast track, a sloppy track, and the turf. And then McLean's Music had 3 winners this weekend as well in the Iowa Distaff with Magical Loot. We had the Prairie Gold Lassie Stakes was won by She's a Funky Drummer, and then the Saylorville Stakes was won by Unsung Melody. So can you all think of another time when we've seen a sire get that many winners and stakes over one day? That was on a Friday.
Not off the top of my head.
Yeah, no. I mean, maybe like, I'm sure like, some top sires have done that in the past, but I can't recall one. So
maybe we'll see Vekoma do that because, right now as a first crop sire doing very, very well. So maybe.
Yeah, Vekoma, he's got Billy Doll coming up in the Schuylerville on Thursday at Saratoga. I'll mention Complexity. I think he has like 9 winners. What a fast start. He's got a horse complexion in that Schuylerville too. So got 2 hot offspring of freshman sire. Complexity and Vekoma have been absolutely outstanding so far.
We should be doing our first crop sire series soon, picking our first crop sires to follow. I'm not sure who mine's going to be or who your all's is going to be. Do you all have any that you're hoping to follow? Staying away from Vekoma because you'll be riding a whole lot if you have that one.
That's a good way to put things. I might let somebody else handle Vekoma. I've still got to do a little studying to see who I want to pick.
We got War of Will and Volatile. It's the sires out there. I don't know if they're going to make the mix though, because you're right. But it's interesting to see with I think with you got Authentic and you've got McKenzie, and there's a lot of like freshman sires still looking to make a mark with their offspring, it'll be interesting to see which 5 we come up with.
Well, the last 2 years I've been a little unlucky and ended up with the top earner both times, I think. So I've ended up having to ride a lot more than I was expecting. Maybe I'll get lucky this year. So I'm not picking Vekoma. All right, well, that's all the time we have today for the Racing Roundtable. We'll be back next Tuesday. Of course, we have week 4 of our fantasy handicapping contest. Head to our TwinSpires social channels to learn how to enter the final week of our contest, and we'll see you next time.